Hi everyone, my name is Steph. This is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. This is a books beside my bed video where I wrap up, well, normally the last 7 days worth of reading, but now we are going back 2 whole weeks, which means there are 22 books that I'm going to be talking about, and it's a lot. So we are going to try and keep this snappy, but if you need to get yourself a drink or a snack, settle in, because I'm not quite sure how long this video is going to be. I'm going to try and keep it reasonably manageable because I have to edit this thing. So this is my reading week from the 9th until the 21st of March. The reason that there was quite a big gap is I've had a couple of really big weeks, and in between those big weeks I also had a massive weekend of 3 hockey games and a book signing. In hindsight, not my finest choice because I did get sick just after the weekend, and I do have a vlog of that weekend, and it was a really great weekend, but just sitting in the middle of where it did, that was an interesting choice. But to be fair, that weekend was booked well before anything that happened during the weeks on either side of it did. So sometimes you just can't help life. All right, so as I said, there are 22 books that I'm going to talk about. The first 3 I'm not going to talk about in any depth because they are featured in that weekend reading vlog. So if you want to find out more information, you absolutely can. The first one is Missing in Action by Kate Canterbary. This is the second book in a spin-off from the Walsh series, and it is an romance between a former CIA spy who gets burned and a very straight-laced office manager who works for the spy's sister-in-law. I also read Off Season by Jodi Oliver. This is an hockey romance. It is the second book in the Chicago Thunder series, and it is following members of the same team. Delightful book. Again, go check out that video if you want to find out more information. And the third book that I read in that vlog was Wild Ride by Kate Meader. This was a book that I picked up that weekend on the book signing, and I really enjoyed it. This is the 8th book in the Rookie Rebels series, and it is an age gap romance with an older heroine who is a single mum who falls for a bad boy from the Chicago Rebels ice hockey team. And he falls first. He falls first. Anyway, you can see my full thoughts in that video. Next up on my review list is a book that was sent to me by Hachette, so thank you very much to them. It is a middle fiction fantasy title. This is Paper Dragons: The Fight for the Hidden Realm by Siobhan McDermott. This is a fairly recent release. I think it came out either at the end of February or the start of March, and it is about 12-year-old Shijing, who is desperate to try and be recruited for this magical underwater school and be the representative of her town where she is considered the outcast. However, she discovers at the very start of the book, so this isn't a spoiler, that she has not been selected, and she's deeply upset by this because she knows that the town is going to run her out and basically she'll lose her home. Ultimately, she finds a way to become part of this magical school where she encounters things that she's never thought possible. The people who run this magical school are considered to be immortals because they can adjust their age. So they can age up or they can age down while they're in their role. And she sees just the most amazing things, and she's competing in trials to stay at this school. And she also learns that in this world, candidates and students from this school are going missing, and there is a terrible plague of zombie-like beings who are plaguing the world, and it has something to do with this school. I do have a separate review for this that will be going up on Kidlit Joy in the next couple of weeks. This story was very engaging. There are a lot of really cool concepts and cool ideas, from jellyfish messengers to the dragon boat races, and in the last third of the book, it was very fast-paced, action-filled. It moved very quickly, but the first part did seem to drag a little bit, or at least had inconsistent pacing, as we are getting a lot of information about the world, setting up the characters and where everyone belongs. So it is a little bit heavy on the world building in the first 2/3 of the book. So just be aware of that. It is a fairly hefty middle fiction story, but like I said, there are some really cool concepts in here. I'm keen to see how the author goes in a second book with most of the heavy world building lifting done in book 1. So thank you again to the publisher for sending me the review copy. And then 2 more middle fiction titles that I read this week were books 2 and 3 in the Polly and Buster series by Sally Rippin. So I read book 1 a couple of weeks ago. Book 2 is The Mystery of the Magic Stones, and book 3 is The Search for the Silver Witch. These conclude the trilogy for Polly and Buster, which is a series about a witch and a monster who are best friends, even though the world around them tells them that witches and monsters can't be friends. Polly is dyslexic, and so she has trouble reading spells and creating potions accurately, and Buster demonstrates a lot of ADHD traits in terms of big feelings and also some impulsivity. And the two of them are working together to try and prove to their town that monsters and witches can be friends, even though there are strong groups from both sides who are determined to tell the world that no, that can't possibly be. Meanwhile, there is also a monster that is sort of plaguing the town, and it's up to Polly as a silver witch to be able to stop that. It's a really great series full of great themes of friendship and bravery and courage. and also just gorgeous, simple text that's very easy to get into, as well as illustrations the whole way through the books. Another one I won't talk too much about because I've read it many times and talked about it many times on the channel is In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. This was a reread for Izzy's read along with her channel members. I love this book. It's a contemporary small town romance between two childhood friends who fall for each other. He is a grump, she's a sunshiny primary school teacher, and he has custody of his young niece, who is just a firecracker of a character. If you haven't read In a Jam, you're missing out highly. Like, this is a masterclass in contemporary romance. I very rarely read a book that is as well done as this book in the contemporary romance genre. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I also read What You Are Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Aoyama. This is a book that I had for my Roll of Reads TBR. It was a recommendation from Paige, so it was a host pick, and this was delightful. It feels very slice of life. It's actually I think 4 or 5 stories of people who are at various points in their life, and they end up stumbling across this little community library where the librarian gives them some books that they think that they need, and then also a book that they didn't know that they needed. And it is about how that book affects their life, but it's very slice of life, so it's not their full life story, it's just that moment in time. And it's also about how these stories interweave. It is absolutely gorgeous and just a really nice read if you just want to cozy up on the couch with a cup of tea and read something that is very heartwarming. I also read Popstar, which is the first book in Eden Finley's Famous series, and it's obviously a rockstar romance. It is a rockstar and bodyguard romance, so that makes it a forbidden romance story. We have Harley, who is a character who had popped up in the Fake Boyfriend series, and I'd totally forgotten about that until I was like 2/3 of the way through the book. I was tired when I was reading it. Don't mind me. Anyway, he has an encounter with a stalker, and so a bodyguard is hired for him, and it is about them falling for each other. Obviously, in this case, it's a rockstar romance. There's also a bit of an element of romantic suspense in that they are dealing with someone who is stalking Harley. And for those who are wary of it, guns and gun violence is involved in the story. But it is very much a trademark Eden Finley kind of story. It's very light, very easy to read ultimately. And it was nice to see Harley get a happily ever after. All right, then I read a whole stack of books by Sierra Simone, mostly because I was needing to read a whole bunch of books with pearls on the cover for the Bookemon Readathon. I read the Markham Hall series and the London Lovers series, which all are interconnected, so there's 5 books total. The first one is The Awakening of Ivy Leavold, The Education of Ivy Leavold, and The Punishment of Ivy Leavold. That makes up the Markham Hall series. And then the London Lovers series is sort of connected to that with characters who appeared in that series. The Seduction of Molly O'Flaherty and The Wedding of Molly O'Flaherty. And these are historical erotic romance stories that deal quite heavily with kink and power dynamics. Ivy Leavold is about a young girl whose entire family is presumed dead, and so she has no one except her late cousin's husband, who agrees to take her in, and he is the master of Markham Hall. But there is some conjecture around him that both of his previous wives have died, and as the trilogy of those 2 characters sort of progresses, we learn more about her late cousin and his previous wife, who he had a very tumultuous relationship with. And along the way, it is also about Ivy learning that Mr. Markham has certain preferences in the bedroom that she's never even considered. And their relationship is very up and down, very tumultuous, and there may or may not be a sex party involved at one point. And then the Molly O'Flaherty story, so the London Lovers duology, follows a character who we meet in the Markham Hall series, Molly, who is a very independent woman who is very fiercely determined to live her life the way that she is. She has inherited her father's shipping company, and she's determined to run it, although the board, who are all made up of men, decide that she can't. And in her series, they are basically forcing her to marry, and they're trying to force her to marry someone of their choosing. And it is about her falling for one of her best friends, and also learning to accept help from those around her who want to see her succeed, who don't want to take over from her. The last 2 books in particular deal quite heavily with sexual assault and men preying on women. Could be tough at times to read, but they felt very much like early Sierra Simone. I'm not sure where they fit in sort of her writing history, but they have the same feel as a lot of her older books, and I appreciate that because that's the kind of writing style that I like from Sierra Simone. I did read The Awakening of Ivy Leavold for my tri-chapter video, so if you haven't seen that, I'll leave that linked on the screen. Then I read Morbidly Yours by Ivy Fairbanks. This again was for the Roll of Reads readathon. This is supposed to be a romantic comedy. I think it's just a contemporary romance, and it is the romance between an Irish undertaker, and an American woman who moves next door. And she has come to Ireland to sort of escape her past. Her husband has passed away, so she is still dealing with grief. And she doesn't realise she moves next door to a funeral home. And so that's the first shock, because she gets this delivery of body bags to her home by accident, and she's not quite sure what to make of that. She's come to Ireland because she's got a job as an animator for a local animation company. Part of the book is her dealing with some inter-office dynamics that are really unfortunate. She's dealt with quite unfairly by many of the other employees for most of the book until she stands up for herself at the end. But it's also her falling for Callum, who lives next door, and he's very grumpy, very sort of introverted, and doesn't really do much outside of his work, and he finds it hard to step outside his comfort zone until she comes into his life and the two become friends. He needs to get married in order to keep control of his family's funeral home. It's part of the stipulation in the will from his grandfather, and she's determined to help him find someone that he can fall in love with. But along the way, obviously, the two of them fall in love, and it's very, very sweet, even though they've both got things that they need to work through. There is demisexual rep on the page. The hero is an absolute cinnamon roll, but also do be aware there is bullying, ableism, the death of a friend through a terminal illness on page, and workplace harassment represented, so just be mindful when you're reading it. I also reread System Collapse by Martha Wells, and I do not know what it is about this story, but I struggle with this one. So I think I told you the first time I listened to the audiobook, I just could not wrap my head around the story. I also listened to the audiobook again. This time the graphic audio, but I should have just physically read the book. I'm gonna have to read this a third time at some point because I'm still struggling with it. And I don't know what it is, because I still enjoy the story, and I was enjoying having the Murderbot characters and the side characters that we all know and love from the series there, but I just could not hold the story in my head for whatever reason. So don't know what it is, what it says about me, because I wasn't even doing anything that was distracting me from the story. I just could not wrap my head around it. So I think I need to physically read it. Sometimes that's just the way that it works. I also read Luke and Lexi by Elise Faber. This book I think was originally titled Broken, and this is just a special edition of it that features the character names, which is handy because now I will remember the characters' names. But this is a friends to lovers hockey story. Luke is the GM for a hockey team, and Lexi is his best friend. And Lexi has just gotten out of a relationship and needs a place to stay because she doesn't want to be anywhere near her ex who cheated on her. And she ends up staying with Luke, who has been in love with her for the longest time. And so it is their forced proximity dive into their relationship. And it was just a really light, fun read, which is great because I've got a couple of other Elise Faber books. So I was really pleased to see that this one was one that I was able to pick up and read and really enjoy the writing style. So you'll probably hear more about Elise Faber books in the future. I also read Saint Sorrow Sinner, which is the third and final book in the Gideon Chronicles by Freydis Moon. These are mostly horror stories with some romantic elements thrown in. This one is a sapphic romance. We have Sophia, who has been possessed by some magical religious relic that is quite literally tearing her up inside. So all of the previous characters from the series take her to see Juniper, who is a mystic, in the hopes that Juniper will be able to help remove this magical relic from inside her and save her life. These books are quite dark. They feature quite a bit of body horror and horror in general. This one also has animal death, depictions of mania, discussions of sexual assault and familial abuse and religious abuse, drowning, panic, and suicidal ideation. So be aware of that going into the story. It's a really good series in terms of paranormal horror, and I've really enjoyed it. So Freydis Moon is an author that I do highly recommend. I've enjoyed everything that I've read by them so far, but yeah, you just have to be careful of what you're going into. There are great content warnings at the start of every book, so there is that if you need that to help you make your choices about their books. I also read Make Me Stay and Find Me Worthy by Annabeth Albert. These are both books in the Safe Harbor series, so I've now completed this trilogy. The trilogy overall has this plotline of the murder of a woman who is the mother of one of the members of a friendship group, and various characters are involved in trying to uncover this years later down the track. So one is a podcaster, one is a former investigator, one is a Navy SEAL turned recovery diver, etc. So in Make Me Stay, we have Holden and Callum. So Holden is a former detective who was injured on the job and is now in a wheelchair, and he runs a podcast that is all about true crime. He encounters Callum, who is a recovery diver who he and his friends have asked to come in to try and investigate this lake and try and find some clues to the disappearance of this woman from the town. Callum is a bit of a lone wolf, except that his mode of transportation and his home break down, and so Holden offers him a place to stay, so there's a forced proximity element, and the two have to work together. It is very much Grumpy Sunshine, dynamics. We have pansexual and demisexual heroes on page. We have kink dynamics explored, rope play explored, as well as explorations of grief and loss and PTSD and working through your trauma. And then Find Me Worthy, which is the final book in the series, is actually the son of the woman who was murdered coming home, Worth, and falling for Sam, who was one of their younger friends who idolized Worth while he was growing up. Sam has actually bought Worth's old home and has been fixing it up and is planning on making it a place where he can help foster children. And Sam himself has a cafe and has a business where he tries to help young people who have either been through the foster care system or who have experienced homelessness, etc., to work in the coffee shop and to have the ability to maintain skills that will help them move forward in society. But his coffee shop is threatened by a local chain opening up. Worth also comes back into town and they are discovering more about the disappearance and the murder of Worth's mother, which causes complications. And Worth also ends up staying with Sam at his old home because he's got nowhere else to stay. He's lost his job, he's lost his career, and he's a bit adrift. And so Sam takes him in. This one also explores dom-sub dynamics, where Sam, who is the younger character, is the more dominant in their sexual relationship. Annabeth Albert's books always feature a very diverse cast, but in this book we do have a trans side character who works in Sam's coffee shop who is just delightful, and she is trying to find her own path and navigate her life with the assistance of Sam and Worth. You also have a deaf parent, which was great to see that representation on page as well. But a big content warning in this one. When Worth first comes back to town, he does have suicidal thoughts due to the fact that his life has changed so dramatically. And so Sam is instrumental in helping him to go get some help and to start working through that. I really enjoyed this series. I'm glad that I finally caught up because Annabeth Albert has a new series coming out and I do enjoy reading her books. I also read Lost in the Moment and Found and Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Seanan and McGuire, books 8 and 9 in the Wayward Children series. I listened to these on audio through Libby. Both of these feature Antoinette as a main character. In Lost in the Moment and Found, she runs away from home after her stepfather begins to groom her, and she ends up at this nexus point at the shop for lost things. And she rapidly begins to realize that traveling through the doorways exacts a toll on her, and she grows up much faster than she thought possible. And so her story is working through that and working through the way adults can manipulate children into believing things that they want them to. And then at the end of that book, she ends up back in her real world and finds her way to Eleanor West's home for wayward children. In Mislaid in Parts Half Known, it is Antoinette explaining what actually happens, the reality of the doorways to other worlds, to the other people who live at Eleanor West's school. It also explores how Eleanor West has maybe made some mistakes in the way that she's run her school based on the way that she views the world. And a group of the residents of the school end up going through doorways. They end up back at Antoinette's shop for lost things, and then also traveling through various other worlds. That's a terrible description of the series, but it's kind of hard to talk about these books in isolation without revealing, spoilers for the whole thing because they're quite short. But I will say these two books are some of the better books that I've read in the series since maybe book 1 and book 2, because I was fairly burnt out on this series, but the audiobooks were great and I actually really enjoyed these stories. Just be aware that particularly Lost in the Moment and Found does feature some really heavy themes around grooming and gaslighting of children, because it was rough at times to read. So just be aware of it. And then finally, I reread Brick Walls by L.A. Witt. This was my book annotation for the month. I also did not film this one because I just tabbed it. I'm really tired, so I didn't quite get to it. But I really enjoyed revisiting this one because this is a second chance romance between two goalies who are playing at the professional level in the NHL. They have both had terrible seasons. They get drafted to one of the teams that no one expects much of, but they have been abandoned by all of their goalies, so they need people desperately. And they end up hiring these two who have a past. Sol has a cocaine addiction problem. He has been sober for a couple of years, but part of the reason why Sol and Josh broke up in the first place was because Josh was the one who basically outed him to his team and got him into rehab. And that was after, they'd been together for many years and Josh had tried to help him through this addiction, but Sol wasn't having any of it. And now they're forced together on a team. It's a really interesting one because they're kind of rivals in that they are both vying for the starter position or the starter goalie position on their team, but they don't have to interact a lot necessarily because they're not on the ice at the same time. So that was really interesting. Josh also deals with chronic migraines after a concussion, and so that's an element that's in the story. And as the two sort of begin to rebuild a working relationship with one another throughout the book, they also begin to realize and recognize that there are other members on the team who are using drugs and having to navigate how they get them help, because some of them are experienced players, but some of them are rookies that have been drawn in by the older players. Like, this book is really interesting in terms of a romance, because for the majority of the book, they are very much rivals and they keep apart from each other. And, you know, the moments that they do have are fraught with tension from their prior relationship and knowing whether or not that it's even a safe or good idea for them to be together. But there is a lot of talk in here about therapy and, you know, having friends to sort of talk through the issues that they're going through, and how it all comes together is just really wonderful. Like, this is a really, really interesting hockey romance, and I was so glad to go back and reread it because I had a great time. And we are done. Those are all the books that I have read this week. I am currently participating in the Trans Rights Readathon, as well as a few other books that I'm reading in between that. So next week shall be a Trans Rights Readathon wrap up, which will be exciting because I'm reading some really great books and I'm having a great time with them. In the comments, I'd love to know if you've read any of these books or if you're planning on picking any of them up. If you are, feel free to let me know which ones they are down below, or if you have recommendations for me for other books that you have been reading and loving, feel free to share them down below. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a scuba diving mask thing down below. Apparently there's an emoji for that. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.